I'm a little bit confused about King Lear and John Smith. This will be a stupid question maybe. But when Shakespeare writes something and it's John Smith plays the role of King Lear, the teaching like this is knowledge is removing the ignorance. So the ignorance must be created by the very good script of Shakespeare. So the ignorance is in the personage of King Lear. And when the ignorance in King Lear is removed, the script changed. So John Smith never ceased to be knowing he is John Smith.
No, you're being far too complicated, and
yeah.
you're pushing the limits of the metaphor. The metaphor is just a simple metaphor, which, like all metaphor, has limits. So don't push the limits of the metaphor. The metaphor is very simple. John Smith lives at home. He's not married and he has no children, so he is at peace and happy. So, but he goes to his theatre in the evening and he puts on the character of King Lear, which just consists of an overcoat and a set of thoughts and feelings. And so fully does he play the part of King Lear that he forgets that he is John Smith, and he seems to become King Lear. So he now feels, I am King Lear. Now, so fully does he lose himself in the part of King Lear that when the play ends, he forgets to return. When his friend comes to congratulate him backstage after the performance, he's surprised to find him miserable. So he says, that was fabulous, why are you miserable? And then King Lear starts relating his problems with his daughters and the French and the Kingdom of England. And his friend says to him, don't be silly. You're not miserable because of your relationship with your daughters or the war with French or British politics. You're miserable because you've just forgotten who you are. Who are you? King Lear then says, well, I'm the King of England, I'm the father of 3 daughters. And his friend says, no, don't be silly. You have not always been the King of England. You have not always been the King of England. You have not always been a father. So what are you essentially? These are roles that have been added to you. They are not essential to you. What are you before being a king, being a husband, being a father? So then King Lear thinks for a while, and then he starts describing his thoughts, and his friend says to him, no, your thoughts are not always with you. You haven't always had thoughts, they are always leaving you. What are you prior to your thoughts? So then King Lear goes deeper into himself, and he starts describing his feelings, and his friend says, no, but even your feelings, they are very intimate, but they are still not essential to you. They are always leaving, appearing, leaving. So what you essentially are isn't even your feelings. And in this way, King Lear is going deep, tracing his way back through layers of his experience, trying to find something that is essential to him. And then at one point there is this recognition, I am John Smith. And at that moment, his suffering comes to an end, because his suffering was caused by the belief that he was King Lear. All his problems were King Lear's problems. So as soon as he has the recognition, I am John Smith, his problems, his suffering comes to an end. In other words, his innate peace and happiness is restored. His innate peace and happiness was there all the time, because behind King Lear, John Smith was always standing, not even behind King Lear, but at the very heart of King Lear was John Smith. In fact, King Lear is just a covering, a clothing of John Smith. What John Smith is awareness, that element of ourself that cannot be removed from us. When we've taken away our relationships, our activities, our thoughts, our feelings, what remains is the experience I am. The equivalent of I am John Smith in the story. That I am, before it is qualified, the knowledge I am, before it is qualified by thoughts, feelings, activities and relationships, is our essential, irreducible self. And it has nothing to do with the life of the character, the fact that we might be a father, a mother, a child, a doctor, a bus driver. It has nothing to do with the content of our thoughts or feelings or any of that, just as the knowledge John Smith has nothing to do with what takes place in King Lear's life. So that is why in this approach, one of the pathways we take, one of the most potent pathways we take, is just to take the thought I, or the thought I am, and allow ourselves to be drawn to the experience to which the thought I am refers, before what I am is qualified by experience. The knowledge I am is our essential being's knowledge of itself, and it has no qualities, and therefore it is at peace. Its nature is peace. And the recognition of the nature of ourself, or our self's recognition of itself, the simple recognition of the nature of our being, is what is called enlightenment. It's not. There's nothing extraordinary. It's a recognition. It's not a new knowledge, because John Smith doesn't have the knowledge I am John Smith for the first time. He always knew himself as John Smith. So he just temporarily forgot that he is John Smith, and then he came to know again, or to recognize, I am John Smith. So it's always a recognition. That's what, or a revelation. Revelation from the Latin revelare, meaning to lay bare. It is a laying bare of what we essentially are, rather than becoming something new or acquiring some new knowledge. In enlightenment, there is no acquisition of new knowledge or extraordinary knowledge.
I understand, but
yeah.
The recognition is caused by the removal of the ignorance.
It is revealed, because the knowledge I am John Smith has no cause, because it is John Smith's primary knowledge. There is no knowledge that in John Smith that precedes the knowledge I am John Smith. The first thing John Smith knows is I am John Smith. So there's nothing behind or prior to the knowledge I am John Smith that causes it. However, if John Smith has lost himself in the character of King Lear, and this is called ignorance. Why? Because King Lear ignores his true nature. It is the removal of that ignorance that allows the ever-present person of John Smith to shine. The removal of ignorance doesn't cause John Smith or his peace. The removal of ignorance just is the removal of everything that seems to veil John Smith's knowledge of himself.
But the ignorance was in King Lear. And when the ignorance, what fills John Smith was always John Smith.
That's true. That's why in the Sanskrit language, they don't refer to ignorance, they refer to the illusion of ignorance. Because there is no real ignorance. As you rightly say, John Smith never really becomes King Lear. And this was behind my answer about somebody asked me what it meant. I gave it a different interpretation in the meditation this morning, but somebody asked me yesterday what it means to die before you die. And I was a little bit uncompromising with him yesterday, because I suggested that the idea of dying before you die gives credence to the idea that there is a real separate self or real ignorance that has to be got rid of before John Smith can be recognized. And you're right, ultimately there is no real ignorance, because it's like, in just this, I'm going to transfer metaphors now, because the screen and the image metaphor is better for this conversation. It is the screen itself that assumes the form of the image, and in doing so seems to veil itself. But what is the image? There is nothing in the image that really veils the screen, because all there is to the image is the screen. So there is no real veiling of the screen. And therefore there is no real veiling of our true nature, because of consciousness, because there is nothing in consciousness other than consciousness with which consciousness could be veiled. Just like nothing appears in a movie other than the screen, with which the screen could be veiled. So it's not a real veiling of the screen, it's only an apparent veiling of the screen. It's an illusory veiling. Hence, we should, instead of referring to ignorance, we should really refer to the illusion of ignorance. But as a concession to those of us that believe and feel we are a separate self, the teaching sometimes speaks as if that separate self were real, in order to give the separate self something to do. For instance, let me explain why it's legitimate to do that. If at the end of the play, King Lear's friend had come to congratulate him backstage and found him miserable, and his friend had just said to him, "Don't be so silly, your suffering is an illusion," what would have happened? John Smith would have just remained suffering. It's true, yes, your suffering is an illusion. But if his friend had just told him that, nothing would have changed. So the teaching is not always trying to speak the absolute truth. In fact, if the teaching always wanted to speak the absolute truth, we would just sit here in silence all weekend. As soon as we open our mouth, we are making a concession. And so here, we're not concerned with always speaking the absolute truth. We're concerned with the removal of suffering. In other words, we're concerned with happiness. Have you all come here this weekend because you want to hear the absolute truth, or because you want to be happy? You're all here because you want to be happy. That's the reason we come. We couldn't care less about the absolute truth, really, or a perfect formulation of the absolute truth. We're interested in happiness. So that is what the teaching is addressing. King Lear's friend is not trying to is not interested in telling King Lear about the absolute truth or non-dual philosophy. He's willing to make a concession to King Lear. And he said, "Okay, King Lear, you think you're a father and a king. Let's explore that." So you're right. From an absolute point of view, there is no real ignorance, that there is no real suffering. But I don't feel that it's appropriate for someone to stand up and say in the face of everybody's experience, there is no suffering.